I came in with a certain demeanor and a certain approach. I've got some notes here that we want to talk about student debt. And it's not the rant I normally do because people are tired of that rant.
We know where you stand.
But, you do know where I stand. And I think, okay. You asked for it. How many more people are standing where I am now than were? What did you say during the break? That there was a crawl at the bottom of the television, and it was about that we finally surpassed $1.5 trillion. And you said?
I'm seeing a lot of that in the news.
You're hearing
days.
more of that, are you, Royal
Yes.
Rib? So, the things that I was talking about 3 and 4 years ago when it was $1.1 trillion, you mean to tell me that other people are talking about that now? That when I was the crazy anti-education radio show host, you mean to tell me that some of the more esteemed and polite folk in our business are beginning to say some of the same things I said 3 and 4 years ago? However indecent I may have said them, or is that what you're... See, my chest is kind of poking out
look
now.
at you, man.
Yeah,
You're
I need to be I told you so.
full
guy.
of yourself.
Let's do this. Let's do this because I don't want to lose this information. I think it's interesting and I think it's very relevant. We were talking yesterday about the reality of student debt. I'm not talking about whether or not a college education is worth it or not. I think I made it crystal clear where I stand in regards to the value proposition, not whether education's good or bad. I'm talking about the value proposition.
And this kind of came out of the Goldman Sachs approach that you read.
Goldman Sachs has done a lot of research and analytics that Bloomberg began reporting on. And I heard the Ken Minute yesterday, Alec, and it was kind of some of this sort of thing. Goldman Sachs is beginning to kind of believe that we're almost to that point where the default rate will so far exceed the people paying on time that the bubble begins to burst, and the amount of money the federal government has backstopped, 90% of all federal loans are backstopped by the federal government. There's going to be another financial calamity, this time based on student debt. Here are some of the numbers that Goldman Sachs are deeply concerned with. And I think, that, once again, we're not debating the value proposition of education. We've done that multiple times. It's always an interesting conversation. We always have people call in or email saying, you're not going to believe how much my kid owes. You're not going to believe how much I owe. You're not going to believe what my brother owes or what my brother's son or daughter owes. We've had so much interaction in regards to that. So we know there's a problem, that there's no question about it, that there's a problem. Here are some numbers that Goldman Sachs finds very interesting. And rest assured, Goldman Sachs doesn't care if you graduate from Carolina, drop out of Clemson, have a degree from Harvard. They don't care. They're in the business to do what? Make money. That's all they're in the business to do. And if they see an opportunity, they're going to take advantage of this opportunity. But for those who say there's nothing to see here, you're becoming fewer and fewer. There is something to see here. We have charged far too much for kids to receive and attain a college degree, period. Let's start there. That's why we've got these numbers that Goldman Sachs finds so interesting. The student debt total has exceeded $1.5 trillion. Unbelievable. Unbelievable. 10 years ago, not 40 years ago, 10 years ago, it's $675 billion. So we've added nearly $1 trillion in student debt in 10 years. That's $100 billion a year. I mean, get your arms around that. Why don't, it goes back to the robotic society. Somebody said these 4 words, education is the key. Okay, education is the key. At $10,000 a year, education is the key. At $20,000, education is the key. At $30,000, education is the key. And like robots, we just kept marching along, and we kept borrowing money, and we kept getting degrees, and people with degrees kept working at Starbucks. Not that there's any shame at all in working at Starbucks. I just doubt that's why you go to college. But we just kept going down this road. And here's some of the realities. 3 million former students owe over $100,000. The average of those 3 million is $137,000. About 1 million students owe over $200,000. The average of those is $284,000. Both numbers, listen to this. This is mind-boggling to me. I am so glad I don't own stock in a business that has this financial sheet. The number of former students who owe over $100,000 and the number of former students who owe over $200,000, the number is increasing about $150,000 per year. Think of that. We've already got 3 million who owe over 100. We're adding 150 a year, 150,000 a year. We've already got 1 million people who owe over 200,000, and it's increasing at about 150,000 per year. So it will not be long, Rev, in 5 years or so, that number will be 4 million and 2 million. 90% of all the debt is federally guaranteed. It's federally backstopped. It's very similar to Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. It's a little bit like the government shutdown of the mortgage industry. We can't do with so many mortgages because the government's so intertwined in this. Because the government, somebody said that education is the key and everybody's got to go get a college degree. And that's kind of where we are. We got a lot of people with college degrees. They're just not worth the paper they're written on. And these numbers are emphatic proof of that reality. Here's something I found very interesting. In 2016, 3 million 60 and over individuals have student debt. 3 million people over the age of 60 have some degree of student debt. So we're adding about $100 billion a year, give or take. I think one year it was $94 billion, the other year is $103 billion. So we're averaging adding about $100 billion per year to our student debt. Now, Goldman Sachs believes that increases to about 140 or 50 billion over the next 5 years. They think that number goes from 100 billion to 150 billion a year over the next 5 years. They have a 5-year horizon that they say this is the most ridiculous financial model they've ever seen. They believe this financial model is more damaging than the housing calamity. Now, it doesn't affect as many people because, you got to have a house. You don't have to go to college. I still argue, and Goldman Sachs is full of smart people who love making a buck. I've never heard anybody at Goldman Sachs, as I read some of this reporting, I've never heard anybody say what I argue, and that is, at least when the housing bubble burst, there was a tangible asset to repossess. There was a home. You may have owed $200,000. You may have home may have been worth $150,000. You're upside down $50,000. But there was some way for the financial industry to recoup some of its investment. Upside down. You'll be upside down in your home. What do we do, Rev, when the default rate exceeds 26%, somewhere thereabout? What do we do when it gets there? Do we repossess the education? Do we take a drill and drill inside of someone's skull and extract that degree in sociology or that degree in Greek literature? Once again, I'm not talking about the argument we make as to whether higher education is worth it or not. I'm arguing the financial side of this dynamic. And it's unbelievable to me how we're not addressing it, and we continue to allow kids to borrow enormous amounts of money to go get degrees that may or may not help them make a better life in a better way. But Goldman Sachs has made it crystal clear. And Goldman Sachs is not nostalgic. Goldman Sachs is not Americana. Goldman Sachs is not into what makes a better society. Goldman Sachs is out for one thing and one thing alone. They are capitalist in its purest sense. You talk about the animal spirits of capitalism, they overflow at Goldman Sachs. And they have made a calculus that this bubble is going to burst, and when it does, they're going to figure out a way to monetize it. They're going to figure out a way to come out on the good side of the financials, not the story, not the narrative, not the why are so many kids and why do we have these degrees and why does it cost so much? We're not talking about that. We're simply talking about a financial issue that is confounding to me how we allow ourselves to keep going down this road. It's absolutely unbelievable to me. And Goldman Sachs will make a lot of money once it bursts. And I have no idea where the government comes up with the money to pay the debt off. I don't understand how the financial instruments work. I don't understand shorting higher education. Nobody understood shorting the housing sector. Remember the movie The Big Short when Michael Burry went into Goldman Sachs? Goldman Sachs is on the wall, and Dr. Burry said, I want to short the housing market. And he said, we don't have an instrument. He said, but I do. I want to short the housing market, and you are the most likely suspect to create an instrument. And then we got in all these synthetic derivatives and credit default swaps and all these other sorts of things. And Goldman Sachs took the bet. They took the bet of not betting against the housing market until they realized that the good doctor had made the right bet, and the housing market was indeed going to collapse. And we know what we dealt with in the years following that financial calamity. I think this is very similar. I really do. I think the government's going to have to bail out to the tune of, $1 trillion maybe. Because like I said, Rev, we're adding, I mean, think of this. We're adding 150,000 people per year, every year, who owe over $100,000. And we're adding 150,000 people every year who owe over $200,000. That's an unbelievable statistic to me. And if I'm at Goldman Sachs, and I'm not, I don't have a degree in mathematics from MIT or Harvard or Yale, or, I mean, all those guys do and all those ladies do, and they're far brighter than I at understanding how the numbers work. But I can sit on the back of a tailgate on a Chevrolet pickup in Pamplico and argue that you can't do that. I mean, you can't continue down that road, but so far. It'll be interesting to watch itself play out. I may get the report to Alec I mean, if any of you are nerds like I am in regards to the Bloomberg reporting of Goldman Sachs, and Goldman Sachs is trying to keep it kind of hush-hush. No, we're not really doing. We would never bet against education. No, I mean, we love America too much. We would never bet against education, just like we never bet against the housing market. You know, everybody deserves a home. I mean, think of this, Rev. Think of how many things we get ourselves in trouble with, and how ridiculous it is that everybody.
Those 4-word sentences get you every time.
They do. And they're well intended, and they mean well, and they sound good. And the politicians in particular can spin it a certain way. Home ownership is the key to the American dream. And out of that came the biggest financial calamity in 100 years. Just simply a politician uttering the words one day, home ownership is the key to the American dream. And the robots in society go, yeah, it is. You're right. Home ownership is the key to the American dream. And then riding down the road, listening to radio, some politician says, education is the key. Yeah, home ownership is the American dream, and education is the key. And yeah, everybody needs an education. Everybody needs a home. Next thing you know, we got the biggest mess in the history of our country as it relates to debt. And home ownership is a part of the American dream, but borrowing too much money is not. Education is a key to prosperity and success and happiness and well-being, but it can't be at any cost. And for whatever reason, we just believe, and it goes back to my theory of the excluding of the word no. For whatever reason, 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, America decided to not include in its vocabulary the word no. No, you can't pay that much for a college degree. No, a house isn't worth $140 a square foot. No, you can't take that field and plow it up and develop 150 or 200 lots. No, you can't do that. But we became, as we always do, zealots in our pursuit, and no was not a part of the vocabulary. And I go back to Carl Icahn. I mean, I think you've heard me give the portrayal that Carl Icahn gives on CNBC one day. I'm on the treadmill. Icahn, and he's an interesting guy. He's kind of a controversial capitalist, but he's a bright guy. Icahn said, well, here's the secret, guys, and you know it. We just don't like talking about it. For the past 50 years, we've all been on a party bus, and nobody's going to get off the party bus. Are you going to get off the party bus? Am I going to get off the party bus? We know there's a cliff. And we know the party bus isn't going to run forever. And we know the party bus is going to run off the cliff. Well, let me ask you, you going to tell the driver to stop? Are you going to get off the party bus? I'm not, because I kind of enjoy the ride. And we've been on a ride for about 40 or 50 years. And in that ride, housing has increased to a point that people can't afford it. College education has increased to a point that people really can't afford it. Healthcare has increased to a point that people really can't afford it. Speaking of healthcare, is there another healthcare provider in our state than Blue Cross Blue Shield?
Not that I know.
I don't know of
off
anybody,
the top of my head,
unless it's some group coverage of a plant here whose parent company is, domiciled somewhere else. If you don't believe that the way government organizes things is a racket, and we talk about the monopolies and whatnot, imagine this. Imagine owning a company where you're the only person that provides that good or service in that state, and the federal government mandates that you got to buy it. Imagine the money you can make if you're the only company in a state that provides a good or service, and the federal government mandates that you buy that good or service. But everybody's got to have health insurance. Health insurance is a right. See, it's not the health insurance company's fault. It's not higher education's fault. It's not the housing industry's fault. It's not the financial sector's fault. It's our fault. At the end of the day, the American public get what they deserve. And we kind of like buying houses we couldn't afford. We don't have a problem paying for education that's not worth it, as long as we don't have to stroke a check. We can go borrow the money. Government backstops it. Maybe we pay it back. Maybe we don't. Who cares? The word no has been excluded from the American vocabulary in places that it would have been by far the most sound answer imaginable.